Hey there, and welcome to Connect the Dots Learning Center podcast. I'm Stephanie Wagers, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're a seasoned therapist, clinic owner, or just starting out, this podcast is your go to spot for insights, tips, and stories that'll help you connect the dots in your practice. Today, I'm joined by long term friends Amy and Heather, pediatric OTs and creators of Powerfully You. We're talking all things self regulation through the lens of connection and compassion. From the latest in neuroscience to real life tools for therapists, we'll explore how to support self regulation from the bottom up and top down, all while honoring every child's unique strengths. Well, today I'm here with Amy Lewis and Heather Spann, who are from Powerfully You and both OTs and friends. And you created Powerfully You, which we're going to talk a lot about today. You're from South Carolina. And I want to hear about a little bit about each of your history, like what got you where you are today. So I don't know who wants to start.
Um, I decided I wanted to be a pediatric OT when I was 12. I started
Wow.
it was definitely a family situation. My
Okay.
dad was a professor at the university here, the medical university, and after school I would walk to his office and I'd have nothing to do. So he signed me up to go shadow and volunteer starting in sixth grade. And my favorite people to watch were the occupational therapists because they would walk in to work with the kids and you saw them light up and they had a relationship with them. And so I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So my dad was friends with some OTs in the department, and he hooked me up with them, and they helped me figure out how to get my high school, obviously middle school and high school done, and then what I needed to do in college to be an occupational therapist.
Can I ask really quick because that was how many years ago I
Oh,
mean, OT looks very different, right?
yeah, let's see, that was probably in the 80s.
Okay.
Um, and the therapist I was actually watching was a pediatric burn therapist.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but relationship was still key with what she was doing
Yeah.
and loved it. I could see how the kids were responding to her, and it was different than any of the other healthcare professionals that were coming in to interact. It was an atrium, a child's playroom, and I
Okay.
just wanted to do what she did.
That's amazing that you had that experience so young.
It was definitely a meant to be.
Yeah.
Um, I am very thankful for that. And I
Mhm.
have loved being an OT, and I've done pediatrics my entire career. So I've been a pediatric OT for 25 years, and I still love working in a variety of environments with my kids. They are definitely some of my greatest teachers.
Awesome. How about you, Amy?
Yeah, so I didn't know that early on. Um, I
I don't think
think,
most of us did.
right. I think I didn't even know what an OT was
Yeah.
until I was in college, actually, and I went to my health careers advisor. It was before you had the internet and could look things up, and I said, I thought maybe I wanted to be a PT, but I don't quite want to do that. And maybe I want to be a psychologist, but I don't quite want to do that. I kind of want a combination of the two. And he pulled out like his 3-ring binder with all of the healthcare fields. And he said, I think you want to be an OT. And I read the description and I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. And I did most of my volunteer work in a rehab unit and I really enjoyed it. And so I went to school thinking that that was what I wanted to do, was work in adult rehab, and got out of school. My very last rotation was in an adult rehab, and I cried every day. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, it
Just
was hard.
stressful or
It's hard to say now. I think that at the time it was a lot of treating several patients at once and putting them on a machine and
mm,
do 30 reps of this. And I think also there weren't any windows in the clinic. Like, it's all those little things where it's like I felt like I was in a cave all day.
right, right.
Do things that they didn't feel connected to. And of course, there are other ways to work in rehab. And I had been in a place that I enjoyed before, but for whatever reason, I just felt like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I don't want to do the thing that I wanted to do. And so I guess what I would say is I know myself now, I kind of shut down under stress, or at least that was my pattern at that time. And so I got out of OT school and worked in a furniture store for 9 months.
Oh, you're kidding. You have had it. You were like, this is not
I think it just, that was my pattern. Like I'm
okay.
thinking, I've never said it this way before, but I think that my pattern of response at that time was to shut down.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've seen that across time. I used to have amazing mentors come and treat children on my caseload once I was in pediatrics and doing it. And they would come see kids on my caseload for a week. And I would invite area therapists to come and learn from them. And it's funny, I mean, every single time, probably, they would leave and Heather would say, I'm so excited and energized, and I have all these new ideas, and I can't wait to go out and try all these things. And
Mhm.
I would shut down. I would be like, I will never be Patty Otter. I will never be able to do what she does. And I would have a couple of weeks where it was just like my whole system would kind of shut down and I couldn't take in new information. And yeah, so I think that I kind of did that after OT school and was like, I'm going to go do this easy thing that doesn't require me to make a commitment for the rest of my life.
Right.
And eventually I decided, I do actually like OT and I'm going to go back and try it. And I did adult home health.
Mhm.
And the agency I was working for got a call about a child who needed therapy. And they asked if I would be willing to do it. And I said, I didn't do any pediatric electives. It wasn't my focus in school,
Yeah.
and somebody else would be better at this.
Yeah.
They said, there isn't anybody in the county. It was in a rural county.
Mhm.
Said,
You're it, right?
either you or the
Yeah.
child doesn't get seen. And so literally my pediatric career started with, I guess I'm better than nothing, you know? um, and after a couple of weeks of treating her, I said, this is what I want to do. And then from there, I sought out a lot of mentorship because
Okay.
I wanted all the information. I wanted to know all the things. I wanted to do it right.
Yeah.
And that at the time was my path to getting there, was
Yeah.
to gather the information. And
So you've obviously gotten over the shutting down factor, right? Or
well,
do you still kind of go through that?
no, I think I do now, but I can still feel that tendency. I think that, we develop, or we have the ability to develop awareness of our patterns of response.
Mhm.
And it varies from situation to situation, right? Like whether we tend to be somebody who goes into fight or flight, or whether we tend to be somebody who shuts down under stress. And so now I recognize it and I can choose to respond differently. Heather and I see self regulation as not just one thing. So,
Mhm.
not just the ability to match our arousal to the situation,
Right.
see it from really basic physiological regulation. We see it from attachment patterns, which is kind of what I'm talking about, like what I mentioned a moment ago for myself. We see it from the sensory motor perspective that, the pieces of regulation that come from understanding sensory integration,
Mhm.
and from a relationship perspective of being
Yeah.
able to be in relationship with others. And then from top down perspectives of understanding ourselves and
Mhm.
using cognitive strategies. Like for us, regulation covers all of that. And I think that Powerfully You came from our personal explorations
Yeah.
into all of those areas.
And wanting to support, that was an underlying, if you really view regulation this way, it really
Mhm.
is underlying everything we're trying to do.
Everything. Everything.
And
Yeah.
it became really the ultimate foundation of what I needed as well in my own practice.
Mhm.
And there wasn't anything that was really meeting my kids' needs. I was doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I'm lucky. I worked at a phenomenal clinic when I first graduated, and we used the alert program, and we all were trained in Wilbarger and sensory defensiveness, and we all got SIPT trained from the clinic.
Wow.
Was amazing. And it was OT, PT, and speech.
Mhm.
So I always knew we had to work with the whole child.
Mhm.
Didn't really know how to pull all these pieces together. We started learning more about interoceptive awareness from different ways, but we
Right.
wanted to put that into practice. We were doing trauma training with Kim Barthel, and we wanted to bring, that being trauma informed into practice. And then some of my kids were really struggling with some of the methods I was using to teach them awareness of regulation.
Mhm.
Some of the behavioral systems had gotten tied in to being a
Mhm.
certain color. And, they'd
Uh-huh.
be in tears telling me, Miss Heather, I'm green. I'm good. I'm green. And I'm like, okay, I've got to do something different. Something's
Yeah.
not working. It's not landing for my kids. And,
Right.
Amy really came up with the original idea. And I'm just the clinical piece that loves to go out and try things and get the kids,
Okay.
um,
Okay. And how did you guys connect or meet? How long have you guys known each other?
Well,
that's kind of funny.
we met in a supper club. Like
Yeah.
somebody else knew both of us, and we went
Okay.
to the club
A
together.
physical therapist that worked for me at the time went to college with her.
And
Okay.
then we ended up having our first children 3 weeks apart.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
and so it was really more of, okay, we went from being pediatric OTs to being moms who are home on maternity leave, and what do you do with your time, right? And we loved our jobs, so it was getting together on Thursdays and putting two very little babies on the floor, and then just talking about whatever came up. And so our oldest children are 19 now, and I think that we have met most Thursdays for the last 19 years.
Hmm.
And the last 5 or 6 years have usually been our Powerfully You work day, where we get together and write new things, or do the paperwork that needs to be done, or
Yeah.
talk through clients, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The funny thing is, if you look back over the 19 years, we were always creating something. Just originally, it was around our own kids.
Uh-huh.
We would create a sensory diet with our own children and try it. Or we'd create these crafts we wanted to try. I feel like we've always actually been creating something. It was just Powerfully You, about 6 years ago, that really started taking all of the creative parts and
Mhm.
the knowledge and the research and our experience clinically and putting it all together.
Okay.
That was really just another fun project for us at the time.
Yeah.
Wanted to try it and see if we could put something together and try a pilot study. And it was really just something, I was excited to use clinically. Amy was super excited about the research piece of it. And it's just kind of evolved from there.
In 2019, we met with Patty Coker-Bolt, who is a professor of OT pediatrics at the medical university at the time, and told her our idea. And I said, I think I'll take about a year to write it. And she said, I would think you can write it in 6 months and pilot it this fall. And I was
Okay
like,
then.
Heather said, we can do it. I'm like shutting down over there. We can do
I'm
it.
doing this.
Yeah. And so thank goodness she prompted us to do that, because we started our pilot study in September of 2019, and we ended the week before the world shut down in
Yes.
2020. So we were in a classroom for the fall and the beginning of 2020. And then we were supposed to teach some local therapists who had heard about what we were doing in May of that year. And that had to get canceled because we couldn't do it in person. And Sheila Frick actually called
I love Sheila. She's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Called later in that year and said, I've heard about Powerfully You, and we would like for you to teach for us for a year or two.
Wow.
And
Okay.
first, our first online classes were for Vital Links, and we
Okay.
taught for them for about a year, and then we taught for the Star Center for one round, and then we got brave and did the AOTA provider stuff and went out on our own.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just went through that process of renewing it all.
it's rough.
Yes, it is.
So that was kind of where we got started.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So can you explain Powerfully You? What is different about your program? How can you kind of explain it in a nutshell? What would a therapist be getting if they took your course?
I mean, I think that our tagline, kind of the like way that we really characterize it, is that it's coming from a lens of compassion and connection, and that it values individual differences. So that's kind of our big focus overall. Um, I would say though that we really, as things have evolved, look at it as more than just a curriculum. So it is a curriculum, it is a set of lessons. But the reason that we require training for everyone who implements it is that we really see this lens that we use as more of a framework than just a curriculum. And so we are always thinking about the layers of support that we can provide for expanding regulatory capacity. And that's not always with a curriculum, right? Like a top-down way of teaching isn't going to meet every child where they are in their development. And so the course that we do, and like why we feel like that part is really the important part of it, is that we are teaching about all of those underlying concepts. And we talk about how to facilitate building, that interoceptive awareness, and building that awareness of body activation and awareness of our body battery, and then
Using sensory motor tools that are really individualized based on how your body and brain respond to them, not just a general list of here's some sensory motor tools, like
Here's your sensory diet. Go for it. Yeah.
exactly, let's see what sticks. No, what does this child's brain and body need? And to do that, we have to build what we call body sensing, being able to be aware of that interoceptive awareness, to notice, does this work for you? Does that not work for you? And then we can get precision with sensory motor tools, but then we can also teach them thought-based tools that also support, for those higher level capacities, support regulation, using inquiry, and being able to really practice self-compassion. These are all things that OTs weren't typically using, but they're all very evidence-based that it supports regulatory capacity. And we wanted a child-friendly way to teach that, but also making sure that it was taught from a lens of curiosity, non-judgment, keeping with our values as an OT, because we also want our kids to have felt safety and connection first. That is always primary to whatever we're doing.
And I think that that's the way that it is maybe different than other things that are out there, is that we are really explicitly acknowledging that teaching these lessons is not the only way that we work on regulatory capacity. So when we are supporting regulation with a child or with an adult, we are going back to looking at the environment and the task, and is it a match for this child? And we are looking at, we both are trained in sensory integration strategies and theory, and interventions and theory. And there are going to be many times where a curriculum isn't where we start with a child. And so I think that one of the ways that Powerfully You is different is that we want to give that information to the therapist. We want them to understand when it's going to be appropriate to use a lesson, when it's appropriate to kind of build this information into whatever activity you're doing, or when they're not ready for either of those and you've just got to back up and provide some sensory motor support. We're
Mhm.
trying to build awareness of pediatric therapists and knowing when to do what and how. Then if you're using the curriculum, how would you work that into everything else that you're doing?
Okay. So is there a particular like age range that this curriculum is? I keep saying curriculum, more of a framework, right? It's more of a framework of thinking, is most successful.
I'll speak to that.
Hmm.
I actually love treating across the lifespan. I do early intervention, clinic, and then schools.
Okay.
And I used to do group homes. And I so wish if I could travel back, I could
Yeah.
take what we've done with Powerfully You back into the group homes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Really, when we started, we were targeting a second grade classroom.
Okay.
But as Amy said, when we started really doing our research on the concepts and how to look at those concepts, not just in the curriculum, but in how we set up with teaching the adults, teaching the kids, it really has been something I use the concepts now across the lifespan. So if I'm
Hmm.
working in early intervention, I may not be explicitly teaching a 0 to 3-year-old how necessarily to self-regulate, but I
Right.
want to help that caregiver, that adult, have eyes to see when that child is maybe starting to tip towards protection or, is wanting more food and coming towards them versus coming
Mhm.
away. What are those signs and what do I notice in that child so I can help the caregiver? And then how can we build co-regulation and connection with those early intervention? And
Mhm.
then as my kids get older, I have a 3-year-old that was working at a preschool, and he drew himself in the sand because he was mad. And he
Mm.
was drawing his tight muscles. And I've never explicitly talked about it.
Interesting.
But while we're in play, I'll be like, "Ooh, are you feeling a little upset? Your muscles
Yeah.
look a little tight. I wonder if you feel your hands. They're in a fist." And he was drawing that in the sand.
Wow.
And he's 3. And so I think exposing our adults and our kids to these concepts, it really has been amazing. And then
Mhm.
we've done classes for therapists that are trained in Powerfully You on expanding their regulatory capacity as an adult and as a therapist, because
Yes,
we need this, right?
we do. We do. And that is the highest thing that is leading to burnout, I think, in pediatrics.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Um, and I think having the knowledge that we have is helping I mentor a lot of students come in and out of my
Hmm.
class, and they're learning even the basics of felt safety and connection. And if you can create that in a session, it's so much easier to meet your objectives and your goals. And
Hmm.
you're making a huge difference in that child's life, even if you
Right.
just start with that one concept.
Right.
Hopefully that will help decrease some of the burnout. We all got into this profession wanting to help, and it's
Yeah.
frustrating when we feel like we can't make a difference.
In our current course, I mean, we have kind of two formats, but, or maybe three formats, but we did find that teaching it in 2 days was not as effective as spreading it out. And the reason is that these concepts really do apply to everyone at every age.
Right.
And honestly, a lot of the practices that I brought in the beginning were things that I was learning through the somatic practices that I was doing, mind body medicine kind of things, as well as um, going to therapy and learning self compassion. Like those, I think that the range of interventions can go from, like Heather said, introducing in play some of the body sensing and noticing
Hmm.
those feelings in your body, up through adults being able to start there, just like the kids, like going straight to self compassion isn't often going to be as effective as helping even an adult to learn how to notice sensations in their body and be aware of what they're feeling. So our course is now spread over 4 weeks and gives the therapist or health professional the opportunity to try out some of these strategies for themselves. Like,
Mhm.
try out what it is like to notice sensations in your body, try
Mhm.
out connection strategies and all these things and build their own understanding, and also allow them to hear how everyone in the class is different
Mhm.
Right.
and how for some people noticing what's happening in their body is really easy and
Mhm.
comfortable. For other people, it's very uncomfortable and they don't like it. And then for some people, they're like, I just really can't do it. And I
Mhm.
think the experience of doing that and hearing from other adults helps us when we go to work with our clients, because
Right.
we have a better understanding of not only how we experience the world, but how other people
Mhm.
experience the world. And that applies to every client that we have is going to be
Right.
different.
So you do really blend that bottom up, top down approach to, together. Yes. And that's kind of the issue that I think as OTs, we're really good at scaffolding things, but sometimes I love the zones program, but you're right. It is like it doesn't fit all the time. And some kids it just doesn't connect with. And it can be really hard to kind of explain to parents as well. So you're really teaching that co-regulation piece and
Well,
working with the parent as well to identify their feelings. Right.
we really want them to start noticing. We teach activation, what we call that arousal piece. We
Yeah.
call it activation, and we teach it based on how the child's feeling in their body.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I was finding, and this is why I was so excited when we started creating this, is many of my kids on the outside looked pretty calm, collected, and maybe I would call it centered on the activation meter, right?
Okay.
They would match for learning. But internally, many of my kids, their hearts were racing. They were holding their breath. Their muscles were tight. They were actually neurologically activated, which
Yeah.
wasn't a match for the activity that I was trying to engage them with.
Right.
Um, and there was just a disconnect with that. And I wanted a different way to help describe how they were feeling in their body that
Mhm.
wasn't good or bad.
Mhm.
We teach just like zones, which is a wonderful thing zones did. You
Mhm.
know, they taught no zone is good or bad. It was
Right.
definitely never the intent
Interesting.
to be a
Mhm.
behavior. Things kind of happened with that, but it was never
Mhm.
that. But what was happening is many of my kids would go based on their behaviors or what they looked like on the outside. And I wasn't teaching them to tune in on that
Mhm.
interoceptive awareness of how they were
Mhm.
actually feeling. And
Mhm.
as research has shown us, those interoceptive awareness, those body sensations, that's our first alert system. Then
Mhm.
we get the emotions, and then we get behaviors. So
Right.
I was teaching my kids, again, I was doing the best I could with what I knew in the moment, but I was
Right.
teaching them to try to use a tool when we had already had a behavior. Does that make sense?
It
Whereas
does. It does.
them to notice their bodies, I had a better chance of finding a sensory motor strategy or a connection strategy or a thought based strategy that really helped them in the moment um, have their activation level match
Mhm.
what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's not just about meeting expectations, it is also for what we want to do, right? That's also
Mhm.
part of what we have to match for. I'll
So
let you.
when
I'm
you're
sorry.
working with a client with limited language or neurodivergent, how do you go about that teaching that interoception piece? Because I think that is OTs, at least in our clinic, some of the biggest challenges. It's just trying to the language doesn't always work.
So I use a lot of hand signals. In our curriculum, we teach that activation is like your arm. This is super
Okay.
activated. This is centered. This is down. For those that are listening, I'm just
Yeah.
using my arm as a lever.
Hmm.
So we use a lot of nonverbals. We use a lot of very, very simple. Our muscles can be hard and tight, or they can be soft and loose. So we use sometimes symbols, or I'll program it on their AAC device if they have one. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to start giving options. For some of my students, you're right, starting with internal body sensations is too hard. So
Right.
we start with external sensations. Is this comfortable for you? Thumbs up. Is this
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable for you? Thumbs down. Or we'll educate the caregivers as far as, okay, this is what I notice when we turn on this music. Look at their face soften. Their eyes start to gaze towards you. Their
Right.
body starts to relax. They're showing us some body signs that this is comfortable for them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just repositioned them and now, they're an extension. It's just talking through the adults too about these body signs that our kids are showing us, even if they're non-speaking, and then creating awareness around that. So for some of my non-speaking clients, they will use some hand signals or they will use, things on their device that let me know how they're feeling. But
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
times, they're going to use their body to tell me that
Uh-huh.
this is comfortable or uncomfortable. But we're going to keep trying different sensations. And maybe we play with smells. We can use exteroceptive to still create body awareness.
Yeah.
Don't always have to go for those hard interoceptive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like things fast or do you like things slow? Those kinds of really simple, we'll grade it down to that level.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
About meeting the individual where they are. So it's never about, can they do this lesson and repeat the concepts back to me? Like that, we don't care whether they can repeat the concepts back
Nope.
to us. It's what is going to support their regulation in the situation where where they spend their time. And is that more of caregiver training? Is it more of them becoming self advocates? Like how is this particular person going to use this information? But it's always going to start with that awareness of what's happening in their body, whether we're teaching them to notice it themselves or whether we're teaching the caregiver to notice the outward signs that are subtle. It's not the big behaviors. It's not the crying and the hitting. It's like what happened 5 minutes before.
Right. What were the symptoms before? Yeah.
Did you notice how he starts holding his breath? And that's our signal that his activation is changing and he might not be comfortable in his body. And we want to try to provide the things that we know are helpful for him up through someone who's using a communication device. And like Heather said, you want to put in that language that we use in the curriculum into their communication device so that they are able to advocate for what works for them. But I think that the biggest piece is that makes it different is that we are bringing in that awareness of what's happening in our own body to use tools.
Right.
So rather than learning when I am mad, I use this tool. I learn when my body feels a certain way, here's the thing that works for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I find that the tool use and the advocacy for themselves is a lot greater when they can tune into, does that tool actually work for me? Because maybe wall push-ups do nothing for a particular
Right.
child, but for their best friend, they're super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But when kids can notice their own experience in their body, they can pick the tools that are going to support them the best.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're able to advocate for that at whatever level they are able to advocate. Just understanding it from that body-based perspective is going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said something and it really kind of inspired something in my brain that it's the ability for the therapist to recognize what happened before, but that requires the therapist to have great self-regulation themselves. And
Yes.
and which is key. And especially I'm a clinic owner. I know that you have to up productivity because reimbursement's going down. So it's this kind of catch 22 where we're making our therapists work really hard with in hard situations and asking them to self-regulate.
Right.
So, what advice would you give a therapist who is feeling just burnout, strung out, or just noticing that they're upregulating in this session? Or is that too broad of a question?
It's a good question. I think that for me, awareness has to come first, right? And I think that the idea, so there's a Bonnie Badenoch quote. She's a psychotherapist, and there's this idea that everyone is doing the best that they can with what they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Bonnie Badenoch says it in a way that, sometimes that everyone's doing the best they can with what they know doesn't resonate with people. They feel some resistance to it. They're like, well, they do better at other times,
Yeah.
or
Are they really?
or like they're better, but they're not doing better, that kind of thing. Bonnie Badenoch says, I think this is real close to the quote. It's everyone is literally doing the best that they can in every moment, given the state of their neurobiology and the level of support. And I think that believing that is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves, is believing that we are doing the best that we can with what we know in that moment, and having that compassion for ourselves is what allows us to have greater regulatory capacity, right? Like if I believe that I'm doing the best that I can with what I know, and maybe there's also room for growth, right? Like maybe that's, but if I believe that, I am less likely to be critical of myself. I am less likely to put myself into a protective state where I can't learn or do anything or be present for my client in that moment. And it's when I can say, I'm doing the best that I can. And everybody struggles with these things sometimes.
Yeah.
That then we can go, oh, okay, I can just here and be present with this child and know that
like you take that pressure off yourself, right?
Right. And know that being in connection with that child is the best thing we can do. It's primary. And that then we can build from there, right?
Yeah. I love that.
Felt safety and relationship.
Can we talk a little bit about how fascial work and tensegrity medicine kind of impact emotional regulation? I know that that's kind of your jam, right, Amy?
Yeah. So that was actually how I was introduced to interoception, was through more of the somatic experiencing kind of fascial work. And really my journey did involve tensegrity medicine, which was developed by an OT who worked in chronic pain. But that interoceptive sense for a long time was thought of as those internal sensations of things like hunger and thirst and, those basic bodily process senses. But we also have these C receptors that are C fibers that are present in all the tissues in our body, particularly in our fascia. And they are taking in information about the condition of our body in every moment. And they are sending that information to the brain and telling us whether we are comfortable or uncomfortable, whether we are safe or unsafe, whether we feel like approaching or avoiding. And so the work that I learned through tensegrity medicine, I think if I boil it down to what I took away from there was just noticing how things feel in our body creates awareness for us, and accepting it as not being good or bad, but just information. And allowing ourselves to feel those feelings. Like all of those things are things that we practiced. And then in tensegrity medicine, it also involves hands-on strategies that are light touch body work for the purposes of supporting fascial alignment. This idea that we don't have discrete muscles and we're not a pulley and lever system. We're actually a tensegral model. We are a biotensegral being, and that it's all about compression and distraction forces and alignment and the way that our fascia does that. And when we have places in our body where we're holding tension, that might have come from an energy, come from an injury, might have come from an emotional experience, all these different ways.
Yeah.
It affects those C fibers and the information they're sending to our brain. So, I think that body work is another way of supporting self-regulation, right?
Right.
I think that
Right.
that's where we come from when we say self-regulation isn't one thing, and we can't
Right.
approach it for an individual with just one strategy. We have to be thinking of the whole person. We have to be thinking of the bottom up. We also have to be thinking of the cognitive pieces and doing top down. Like, we've got to support the whole person.
Is the tissue work part of the coursework at all, or is that just okay?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
we don't teach any kind of tissue work. We also don't teach sensory integration. We don't teach DIR. It's like they're all,
Yeah, they're your knowledge base. You can't unlearn them.
And we
and
try to point people to, if you're interested in this is a
Yeah.
great class. Or whenever we introduce a concept, we're like, here's some resources. Do a deeper dive. If you've got a
Mhm.
client or you've got an interest in this personally, follow that rabbit hole. There's so many wonderful resources out there.
Mhm.
We
Yeah,
just can't teach it all in the same class.
right.
it's impossible,
Yeah,
right?
for
And
sure.
our tool bag is so big as OTs.
Yes.
I
Yeah, and
always laugh when they're like, "What frame of reference are you using?" Um,
Yeah.
about 500.
And I think that's where it is overwhelming
Yes.
to, yes, to a new grad. I always find the 5 to 7 year grads are actually the ones that realize how much there is to learn.
I
And
remember hitting that mark, like, I know, like being terrified at 5 years, like, I don't know anything
right.
and
because you
sometimes,
recognize how much there is to learn.
right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you still get a child that walks in your door, and as Amy said, if you know that you are doing the best you can in this moment, the child's doing the best they can, the parent is doing the best they can. It allows you to stay regulated and stay curious and
Mhm.
just kind of join in, and
Mhm.
you're going to figure this out together. And
Yeah.
relationship can be key, and you're establishing felt safety first. So then you
Right.
can start figuring out, where do we need to support? Where do we need to pull from our bag of tricks? Do I need to call a mentor? Do I need to get help from another, maybe even another discipline? Maybe it's
Right.
not an IT I need to reach out to. But I think that's the other thing. It's okay to admit we will never know everything. Sorry. We never know everything. And that's actually the fun part of our job if you look at it that way.
Yeah. Sometimes it can definitely feel like overwhelming, right? Our
Yeah.
scope is so large. Sometimes I'm like, can there just be a playbook for this?
Right.
No.
Right.
And
Yeah.
originally, I think some people heard when we created a curriculum, they were like, oh, the
Oh,
curriculum is
good.
action play. And we're like, neither of us are curriculum people.
Yeah.
Neither of us, like, you have to follow the child's needs
Right.
and what their neurobiology needs. And that may not be a curriculum.
Right. Your curriculum is for the therapist of
It
their learning. Yes.
help
Yeah.
guide them. It's a
Right.
tool. Some of our therapists just listen to the curriculum so they can learn how to
Hmm.
introduce the concepts, and then maybe they introduce them in a playful way, or
Hmm.
they're not necessarily putting, most of my clinic kids, I don't put on a computer or an iPad to do the curriculum. I'm going to introduce it in a meaningful way while we're
Yes.
doing something I had already, like, the child and I had already planned to do that day,
Right.
or the child's creating for me in the moment.
Hmm.
It happens
Hmm.
not.
But I will
Yeah.
say there are lessons. I don't know if you said something there and I wasn't sure. There are lessons,
Yeah.
and it starts with body sensing and moves into using that information that we notice in our bodies to see how activated are we. So there are lessons on activation. There are lessons on body battery, which is the things that charge our body, like sleep, nutrition, moving our body regularly, and being connected to other people. And then there are more thought-based tools. So there are lessons, and that's a good scaffolding for someone who is new to this information or new to working with maybe a group or a classroom. The lessons themselves are very helpful
They're a great
for
tool.
OTs who are going into a classroom because,
Right.
that's not
Right.
something we normally do. And so this
Right.
does like a little bit of audio visual support, but they're not interactive, gamey kind of lessons. It's just simple graphics, really simple language that can be adapted to pretty much 4 to adult.
Mhm.
And then, so I just want to say, like, there are lessons, and we do, people have those lessons, but we try to empower people to think beyond the lessons and
Mhm.
incorporate concepts into everything that they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So your program, who would it be best for? Is it great for a new grad, or should they have a little bit of experience under their belt?
Gosh, it is. So we have had capstone students take it,
Yes.
and I
Okay.
love starting people off with
Yes.
this lens. Like, I think that that is so valuable. And we have had people who are 20 years out and who are SIP certified and NTT certified take it and say, this added to my toolbox, and I love the way that it brings everything together.
Mhm.
So I think it's hard to say. I think that it could be relevant to anyone. Uh, I think that, we also really want to have a community. And we offer, like, if you have taken the course once, you can retake it at any point for $50.
Okay.
And we have had a lot of people who come back and take it again and say, I really needed to hear this again after I used it.
Yeah.
Or, the first time around, I was really just absorbing it for myself. And now I really want to take it further. So
Mhm.
I think it could be helpful at any stage.
So you do weekly lessons, right? Is it over 12 weeks?
Yeah. So that is 4 weeks,
4 weeks.
or four 3-hour sessions is
Yes.
how we're doing it.
Okay.
Right now we have it available several different ways. We offer it probably 3 times a year in 4 weeks in a row.
Okay.
And then we have started adding an opportunity, because we had a lot of feedback that some people who take the course, not everybody, but some people wanted to do breakout rooms. They wanted to talk with other therapists. They wanted to be able to ask more questions than we have time for in the course. So
Mhm.
we took those 4 weeks of recordings and make them available in a hybrid situation where the hybrid group is watching the 3-hour recordings and then meeting live with us 1 time a month for 4 months. And so they are able to really implement the curriculum as they're going, ask a lot of questions, have those discussions, and hear how other people in their cohort are using the information. So we have that way. And then we just ended up adding a totally on demand, because we had so many people who said, I want to take it and I don't want to wait until the next round of 4 weeks. And I don't want to do it over 4 months. I want to watch it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So that's now an option as well to take it.
So you have consume it all at once, all online, but the other one is also recorded, but then they're meeting with you, right? It's kind of a dripped out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can choose to, the one that's the 4 months, they can choose
Mhm.
to watch it all at once. But then we have our monthly meetings, which has been fun because they're going out and trying some of it
Yeah.
themselves, but also with their clients. And then they can
Yeah.
come back and we can kind of collaboratively work through some of their questions together.
Mhm.
That's been a lot of fun.
And even the 4-week one that is done live is available for anybody who takes it as a recording, because we know there are people in other time zones who really can't make the time work. And that group of people might want the accountability of doing it on a weekly basis, but not be able to do it in those particular times. So that one is, you sign up for this live 4-week class, but they might be accessing it just as a recording during those 4 weeks.
Mhm.
So
Okay. That makes
they're
sense.
trying to meet everybody's, what they have said, this would work for
Yeah.
me. Like, we can do all of those.
We're OTs.
Yeah.
We're quite well at that. Quite good at that.
Right. And then you have a parent course coming out, right?
We're still working on that.
You're still working on it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We're still working on parent and teacher courses.
We've done some teacher trainings,
Mhm.
but we've not done one that we have recorded. because we've really tried to match some of the districts we've taught for have very specific populations or specific needs.
That's
And
true.
so we
Right.
haven't recorded those. We've done those, live synchronously via Zoom or in person when we've taught teachers or done trainings for them.
It's on our
Yeah.
list. We get a
It's on your
lot
list.
of requests.
Yes.
We get a lot of requests, and I think that it's some ways it's overwhelming because we teach so much information in the 12 hours that we are with the therapists, and it's when we're working with a particular client and their family, we are teaching them the pieces that are applicable to them. And so it's paring down what's the most important and what are most people going to be able to take in. We're still working on figuring that piece out.
And then you have a podcast coming, OT Mentor Moments.
Amy does, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
so that probably by the time that this airs, that will be available. I've been lucky to have amazing mentors, and I recorded episodes actually 2 years ago and was
Wow.
waiting until I was ready to do it on a weekly basis, and that didn't happen. And so I decided that if Brene Brown can release things in seasons, so can I. And, so my first season is Kim Barthel, Tracy Stackhouse, Patty Otter, and Sheila Frick.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, we talk a lot about not only the mentorship piece of learning clinical practice skills, but why is mentorship important to us as people? And how do we think about that mentorship piece? So I look forward to sharing these mentors that I have been so lucky to have in my life with other people. And that will probably be available by the time this podcast comes out. And the name of it is OT Mentor Moments.
All right. And are you sitting down individually with each of them, or is it a group?
Yeah, that is for 1 hour podcasts that
Okay.
are going to be available there. And then on our website, we also have short 10-minute recordings that I've done with that group of people, plus a lot of other really skilled practitioners, where I have asked them questions that I have seen on Facebook that make me think of the information that they provide. And they're not going to get on Facebook and give those answers. And this is kind of me being a go-between of
I
reading
love that.
and
That's
then
great.
getting these answers that point to the deeper information that I have learned from them over the last 20 years.
Fantastic. If an individual therapist wanted to sign up, they go to your website and kind of what's the process versus like if a clinic had a maybe 3 to 5 people, it looked like you guys had a percentage off.
Yeah, we do have group discounts for 3+ and 5+, or if you have a school district, we have done, different arrangements for large groups. An individual can just go and sign themselves up. If you have a group, you can send us an email. There are contact forms on our website, but it's just info@powerfullyu.org. And we will walk you through the process of using a group code to sign up with a discount. And if you have any questions, we encourage people to reach out to us via email, or, via the website has links to our email. That's probably the best way to reach us. We're
Yeah.
always happy to talk to people.
Well, I love everything you guys have done and are doing. Any final thoughts that you guys want to give to? So this podcast is really for therapists and clinic owners that you want people to know.
No, I'm just excited for, all the information you're getting out there. You've had some great people on your
Been
podcast.
fun.
Yeah. And I think that just that idea that we are all doing the best that we can and that we
Yes.
are in this together and we are better
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
one of our
Yeah.
powerful thoughts in the
That's what I was going to
curriculum.
say. And thank you for creating this community because I
Oh,
think
yeah.
we need community to do
We
our
do.
work.
We
And so
do.
for creating this and giving us an opportunity to share our passion, but also thank you for, setting this up and connecting us because that is what makes our job easier. If we
Yeah.
know we can reach out to some OTs in South Carolina or a
Absolutely.
owner in
Yeah,
California.
I am loving it. It's a little overwhelming in the way of like, I just every guest I talk to, I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do that.
Right.
I need to
Right.
simmer down right now.
But how exciting that occupational therapy, we are ever evolving, ever
Yeah.
growing. We,
Mhm.
I believe we just continue to be such an amazing profession, and meeting the people that, you get to meet and we get to meet just gives me hope for it. And that is really inspiring. So
Yeah. I
thank
mean,
you.
we have to collaborate because
We do
can't do it on an island. It can
not.
feel like that and it can feel pretty lonely sometimes, when you're like, I don't know what to do with this. But I
And
mean,
clinic is getting harder, like you mentioned.
it is.
Our clients are getting harder. Our
They are.
families are coming to us under
Mhm.
stress. Our educators are coming
I
stressed out and
know.
burnt out. And so I think right now, especially, we need to lean into each other and know
Yeah.
that we're not alone and we can do this with each other's help. We don't have to do this by ourselves.
Well, Amy and Heather, thank you guys so much. I appreciate having you on today.
Yes.
So nice to meet you.
You nice to meet you too.